Hello, today we're going to talk about the famous Chinese room. In 2011, the computer system Watson, developed by IBM, defeated two top contestants and won the first prize in Jeopardy for $1 million. The headlines were quite dramatic in how they described the event, whether in terms of doom or of extreme optimism. However, there was one particular headline that marked a definite departure from the prevailing hype, and it was by philosopher John Searle. He complained, surely in a cranky voice, I'm sure, well, okay, Watson is definitely a very ingenious invention, but you can't really say that it's intelligent. Come on, he doesn't even know that it won on Jeopardy. The basis for this claim was put forward in an article published in 1980 in the journal Behavioral and Brain Sciences, titled Mind, Brains, and Computers. In it, he introduced a controversial thought experiment called the Chinese room. 10 years later, he gave a more structured statement of his argument in an article, Is the Brain's Mind a Computer Program?, published in Scientific American. In both of these papers, Searle is arguing against the project he calls strong artificial intelligence. This view is comprised of two assumptions. The first one is that appropriately programmed computers literally have cognitive states. It's not that the computer would simulate mental states or would act as if it had a mind. No, the idea is that the computer would itself have mentality. The first thesis had to do with the nature of mentality. Number two has to do with how to explain mental states. It says that you provide an explanation of a mental process or state, such as perception and understanding, by coming up with a computer program that exhibits the appropriate input-output pattern, plus some additional constraints, you would think. So AI programs provide explanations of human cognition. They tell us how our own minds work. This is in contrast with what Searle calls weak artificial intelligence, which is defined as the view that the computer plays the same role in studying cognition as it does in any other discipline. It is a useful device for simulating and therefore studying mental processes, but the programmed computer does not automatically guarantee the presence of mental states in the computer. For instance, a meteorologist may use a program to simulate a thunderstorm, but the program itself is not wet and it won't knock down any trees. Well, the same happens with the mind. Well, Searle says, I have no beef with this. So now let's go back to strong artificial intelligence. In Searle's characterization, what do the proponents of strong AI think that having a mind consists in? Well, in this view, being in a certain mental state is just instantiating a computer program. That's enough. And so what would be the consequences for the nature of cognition and its study? Well, the consequence is that instantiating the right computer program is a sufficient condition to qualify as a thinker. Right? If you have the right computer program, then automatically you are a thinker. Now, but when we say thinker, we are referring here to any mental state. So something that perceives, remembers, understands, etc. Okay, so how does he test the claim of the strong AI people? Well, it is by means of the famous, again, or infamous Chinese room thought experiment. Depends on how you look at it. And so the question is instantiating a program a sufficient condition for, say, understanding Chinese? Well, Searle's answer starts with the following scenario. So suppose that Searle is given a set of purely formal rules for manipulating Chinese symbols. Right? They're just based, in this case, on the shapes of the symbols, not in terms of their meanings. Now, Searle does not speak or understand Chinese, so he doesn't know what the symbols mean, but he distinguishes the different symbols, the different tokens, by their different shapes. So this is what his ledger book would see. If you produce this shape, then produce this shape, followed by this shape, etc., etc. That's the kind of instructions he's following. So he sits in a room with two small windows, one for incoming symbols and the other for outgoing symbols, right? Suppose that someone then sends a string of Chinese symbols through the incoming window. Then he follows the following procedure. First of all, he determines which shapes are in the piece of paper. Then he looks them up in his rule book, and then he finds the matching symbols. And then following the rule, he will write, or the relevant rule, he will write down the matching symbols on a sheet of paper. And then he plays the result in the outgoing window, where a person outside the room picks it up. So here, thanks to my remarkable photoshopping skills, is a depiction of Searle in the Chinese room. Now, suppose that the rules that Searle applies result, perhaps unbeknownst to Searle, in an apparently normal conversation in Chinese. Well, now the question is, does Searle understand Chinese? Searle's answer is no way, even if nobody from outside the room could tell that Searle does not know Chinese. So here's the situation, graphically summarized. Searle, from his perspective, is just putting squiggles and squaggles in baskets in response to being given other squiggles and squaggles. The people outside the room, nonetheless, think that whoever is inside the room is a competent Chinese speaker who understands every message that is being sent and also provides sensible replies. But this is an illusion, of course. Okay, but what does this scenario have to do with computers? So how do you get a criticism of strong AI out of it? According to Searle, his situation in the room mirrors in all essential respects what a computer does when it runs a program, which is to manipulate tokens according to completely formal rules. In this case, rules that apply to the token shape. But these are completely blind to its meaning. So Searle is, in his opinion, perfectly mimicking the operation of a digital computer. Now, since Searle is in the same position as the computer, he infers that the computer won't understand Chinese either, or anything else for that matter. So manipulating tokens, and thus instantiating a program, cannot be a sufficient condition for understanding Chinese, and in fact for any genuine mental state. Hence, since this denies precisely what strong AI says, the strong AI claim must be false. In sum, why, according to Searle, is instantiating a program not a sufficient condition for exhibiting mentality? Well, because running a program is a matter of following purely formal rules, whereas mentality requires sensitivity to contents or meanings. So having a belief that snow is white, for instance, involves having a mental state about something, namely snow and whiteness. So mental states have contents. They're not just a matter of formal relations. It is the view. Now here's Searle's statement of the argument in 1990. So the first premise is that computer programs are formal, that is, they are syntactic. The second one is that human minds have mental contents. They are semantic. Premise 3 is that syntax by itself is neither constitutive nor sufficient for semantics. And this is precisely what the Chinese room scenario is designed to refute. Also, notice that this is in direct contradiction of what Hogeland calls the formalist motto, insofar as the motto says that taking care of the syntax is sufficient for semantics to take care of itself. So what Searle is saying is this: go ahead, take care of the syntax all you want. You still haven't done anything to the semantics. So Searle's grand conclusion is that programs are neither constitutive nor sufficient for mental contents, which again is also in direct contradiction to the project of strong artificial intelligence. This is also supposed to have implications for the Turing test. Searle in the Chinese room is basically in the same situation as a computer that passes the Turing test, yet there is no understanding going on inside. That means that even if a computer passes the Turing test, that still wouldn't be sufficient for us to say that the computer has a mind. Of course, Searle's method is by any lights impractical, perhaps physically impossible, since his ledger book would be of astronomical proportions, given the combinatory explosion in the number of conversations. But Searle is interested in this hypothetical claim. Even if by, say, a miracle, a computer managed to pass the Turing test, well, that wouldn't mean that such computer is intelligent. So we've heard Searle's criticisms, but what are his positive views? Does he think that there are any machines that think? He says yes, but only certain kinds of machines, such as our brains. He thinks that our brain have biological causal powers that allow us to sustain a mental life. Just like other organs, sustain other biological processes such as digestion and respiration. He doesn't explain very well what these causal powers are, but he takes them to be obvious. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks. Bye.